Welcome to the third lecture focused on how the Nazi Party destroyed democracy. In this lecture, we will examine the different stages that Hitler took to turn Germany into a dictatorship. The first section will examine how Hitler eliminated his main rivals, the Communist Party, from the Reichstag. The second section will examine how Hitler dismantled the democratic constitution of Weimar through the Enabling Act. The third section will examine how Hitler established a police state through the introduction of the Gestapo and the opening of the first concentration camp. Finally, the fourth section will examine how Hitler overcame internal threats from within the Nazi Party, namely through an event called the Night of the Long Knives. Hitler was made Chancellor in January 1933 because the Nazi Party were the largest party in the Reichstag. However, in the most recent election, they had actually lost seats, showing that if they did not act quickly to secure their position, then another extremist party would overtake them in terms of popularity. Their greatest rival was the Communist Party, who had a huge level of support in urban areas from workers and had their power base in trade unions. Therefore, Hitler called for a general election in March, hoping to seize the opportunity to gain more votes while the Nazis were the new and exciting rulers of Germany. On the 27th of February, the Reichstag building mysteriously set on fire. This was only a week before the planned general election. Historians have debated who was responsible for the Reichstag fire. A disabled young person called Marius de Luber was caught red-handed at the scene. He was conveniently a member of the Communist Party. Years later, at a dinner party, leading Nazi Hermann Göring would gloat that he was the one responsible for setting the Reichstag on fire. This probably means that Marius de Luber was a convenient pawn in the plan. He was manipulated into setting the building on fire by someone who he believed worked for the communists, but really worked for Göring and the Nazis. Regardless of Marius de Luber's true intentions, the Nazis used him as a convenient scapegoat. The Reichstag fire appeared on the front page of all the Nazi newspapers and clearly pointed the blame at the Communist Party. Hitler then manipulated Hindenburg into passing what was known as the Protection Law. This gave Hitler special powers to protect Germany from plots and threats. Essentially, Hitler used this to ban the Communist Party from the March elections and to arrest 4,000 of its members. The German people saw this as Hitler's way of dealing decisively with the threats to their country, and in the March election he received even more votes than ever before. This is a Polish cartoon published immediately after the Reichstag fire. The Reichstag looks like the old Roman Senate. This was an iconic symbol of democracy, therefore the Reichstag fire was both a literal and metaphorical destruction of democracy. You can see Hitler dressed as the Roman Emperor Nero, who was the emperor when the ancient city of Rome burnt down. Many at the time blamed Nero for the fire of Rome. The caption reads, "Hitler as Nero. Die, old Rome. Maybe communism will also burn in a wave of fire." This shows that international leaders could see how Hitler would take the burning of the Reichstag fire as a perfect opportunity to get rid of his rivals, the communists. Following the Nazi Party's success in the March elections, Hitler was able to curry the favor of the Centre Party. Hitler needed to form this coalition as he still did not have a ruling majority. The two parties then worked together to pass a law called the Enabling Act. This act was very similar to Article 48. It essentially enabled Hitler to rule by decree. Hitler now had the power to pass laws without consulting the Reichstag. One of the first ways Hitler used the Enabling Act was to ban trade unions. These were the power base of the Communist Party and had the power to call the workers to strike. By making trade unions illegal, the Nazi Party stopped the workers from being able to rally around trade union leaders and voice their grievances. They would introduce their own alternative trade union called the German Labour Front or DAF, but it was a sham and would repress worker rights rather than to represent them. It is ironic to think that the Centre Party, who were pro-democracy, were the ones to facilitate Hitler in this action. It also links back to the fundamental flaws of the Weimar Constitution that meant coalitions were necessary. There had also been a precedent set in terms of the Enabling Act, since Hindenburg had been using Article 48 extensively during the Great Depression. This is a cartoon from Punch magazine. It was created on the 8th of March, 3 days after the election. Hitler is dressed as Julius Caesar, the Caesar who turned Rome from a republic into a dictatorship. Behind him is the aged Hindenburg, represented as the old consul. A consul held the most senior position in the Roman Republic. He is whispering into Hitler's ear. This suggests that Hindenburg was complicit in Hitler's actions, that he supported the destruction of German democracy. Don't forget it was Hindenburg who started the stab in the back rumor that undermined the Weimar Republic from the start. The caption reads, "The Red Peril, this is a heaven-sent opportunity, my lad. If you can't be a dictator now, you never will." The Red Peril refers to the Communist Party, and so is also a reference to the Reichstag fire. The final sentence provides definitive proof that the international community, especially Britain, were well aware of Hitler's intentions to destroy Germany's democratic system. And they did absolutely nothing to stop him. Let's now examine how the Nazi Party created a police state. According to the Google definition, a police state is a totalitarian state controlled by a political police force that secretly supervises the citizens' activities. In other words, the Nazi Party created a state where fear and suspicion ruled. One of the first features of the police state was the Gestapo. This was the secret police. These officers did not wear uniforms and were tasked with infiltrating political meetings of rival parties. As the Gestapo grew in numbers and strength, they developed a network of voluntary informants among German civilians. This led to a feeling of paranoia and fear. Nobody dare speak out in public about the Nazi regime in case they were overheard by a member of the Gestapo or one of their informants. The Nazis also set up the first concentration camp in 1933, in Dachau, just outside of Munich. The first prisoners were not from ethnic minorities, they were outspoken political opponents. Many of them were communists or members of the Social Democratic Party. It was a concentration camp, so the prisoners were forced to do hard labor. This camp acted as a deterrent to others, as people feared that if they were too outspoken, they would be arrested and sent there without a fair trial. Finally, by 1934, Hitler turned inwards to the Nazi Party itself to identify the next major threat. The brownshirts had played a vital role in the Nazis' rise to power. They'd raided the offices and press houses of rival political parties and engaged in street fights with the communists. This had helped to create an atmosphere of chaos and uncertainty, which highlighted the Weimar Republic's weaknesses. However, since coming into power, everything that had made the brownshirts useful during their rise to power now made them a hindrance. They had an uncouth and thuggish reputation, which did not sit well with the Nazi Party's image of discipline and national pride. Therefore, Hitler needed to change their image and improve their reputation. Furthermore, the brownshirts were led by one of Hitler's closest friends and colleagues, Ernst Röhm. He was a larger-than-life character who the brownshirts admired and obeyed. Hitler feared that Rome had become too popular among the rank and file of the brownshirts and so had the power to overthrow him if he so wished. Therefore Hitler and other leading Nazis worked on what they called Operation Hummingbird, a plan to eliminate Rome and his closest followers so to bring the brownshirts firmly under Nazi control. Operation Hummingbird took place on the 30th of June, 1934. However, history knows it by a different name, the Night of the Long Knives. Over the course of one night, Hitler deployed his elite squad of soldiers called the SS to purge the party of anyone that Hitler perceived as a threat. Official Nazi figures state that 85 men were killed in that one night, but historians estimate it could have been up to 1,000 men, including some who were not even associated with the brownshirts and the Nazis, such as the former Weimar Chancellor von Schleicher. As for Hitler's old friend Ernst Röhm, Joseph Goebbels created a media smear campaign to ruin his reputation. Goebbels made public that Röhm was a homosexual and published accusations of sexual misconduct, using homophobia to gaslight the story and turn the general public against him. Röhm was imprisoned on the Night of the Long Knives and Hitler was initially reluctant to execute his old friend. However, 2 nights later he was visited by 2 SS officers in his prison cell and offered a pistol so that he could shoot himself. Röhm apparently responded by saying, "If I am to be killed, let Adolf do it himself." He was then assassinated. Once the purge of the Night of the Long Knives was completed, Hitler absorbed the brownshirts into the main German army, tearing up the military terms of the Treaty of Versailles in the process. They were then placed under much stricter disciplinary control and the SS, otherwise known as the Blackshirts, became the more powerful branch of the Nazi army. Hitler justified his purge of the Nazi Party by saying it was a defensive action against treason. The international community, especially Germany's old enemies of France and Britain, looked on with alarm. However, they did not do anything. They didn't even release an official statement of moral condemnation for Hitler's actions. This therefore starts a policy that would be called appeasement, when other European powers, especially Britain, would allow the Nazi Party to act in an aggressive manner in the hope that by doing nothing they could avoid another major war. This may come as a bit of a spoiler, but the policy of appeasement did not work. The Nazi Party were able to get away with dismantling the mechanisms of democracy and carrying out a huge political purge without any resistance from either the German citizens or the international community. However, Hitler was still technically only the second most powerful man in Germany. After the Night of the Long Knives, he then had just over a month to wait until the 86-year-old President Hindenburg passed away. On hearing that Hindenburg was on his deathbed, Hitler assembled his cabinet, or inner circle, who agreed to pass a law called the Law Concerning the Head of State of the German Reich. This law merged both the role of the president and the role of the chancellor into a single position, the Führer, which simply means leader. Germany was now referred to as the Third Reich, or Third Empire, resonating the patriotism and heritage of Germany's former glory. Let's now return to our overarching question of how did the Nazi Party turn Germany into a dictatorship? Hitler's first priority when he became chancellor at the start of 1933 was to eliminate his greatest rivals, the Communist Party. He did this with theatrical style by blaming the Communist Party for the Reichstag fire and using this to pass the protection law that would ban the Communists from the March election. Secondly, Hitler manipulated both the Centre Party and President Hindenburg into passing the Enabling Act. This dismantled the Weimar Republic from the inside by allowing Hitler to bypass the Reichstag when passing laws. He then used this new power to create the structure of a police state. Most importantly, he created the secret police known as the Gestapo. Finally, Hitler dealt with internal threats through a purge of rival party members known as the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. This included the popular and charismatic leader of the Brownshirts, Ernst Röhm. Hitler was able to get away with this bloody purge since the international community did not react. He then had less than 2 months to wait until President Hindenburg passed away and he was able to declare himself Führer or leader of the new Third Reich. Thank you for watching. In the final lecture of this series, we will examine how Hitler used fear, propaganda and censorship to create a totalitarian state.